All right, so ready to dive into something a little different. Like imagine you're a huge Bob Dylan fan, right? And you hear there's this new biopic coming out starring Timothée Chalamet of all people.
Oh, you're already skeptical.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
you're practically like, this is going to be awful. But then you read a review and it's actually like surprisingly positive.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's quite a setup.
Well, that's exactly what happened to James T. Keene. He's a self-proclaimed Dylan fanatic, and he wrote this review of A Complete Unknown for America magazine. That's going to be our guide for this deep dive.
Interesting. So we're going into the world of Dylan through the eyes of a skeptic turned fan.
Yeah, you can like totally sense Keene's hesitation in the beginning, but then there's this shift, you know? It's like a grudging respect for the movie and Chalamet's performance.
It's funny how our expectations can shape our whole experience, isn't it?
Absolutely. And get this, Chalamet actually sang and played guitar for like 40 songs in the film.
Wow, that's some serious dedication.
Right. Talk about going all in for a role.
I'm curious, though, what did Keane say about Chalamet actually capturing, the essence of Dylan?
Well, he talks about how Chalamet portrays this really interesting duality. Like, on one hand, there's Dylan's charm, but on the other, there's this almost unsettling intensity.
Ah, that push and pull that Dylan was known for.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Keane even called Chalamet the embodiment of the complete unknown, saying he's alternately charming and vicious, every man but then Mephisto.
Hmm. That's quite a description. So does the film itself, try to unravel that mystery? Does it try to explain who Dylan really is?
Well, from what Keane says, it seems like the movie, much like Dylan himself, leaves you with more questions than answers. It doesn't try to give you this neat and tidy summary of his whole life.
So it's more of a snapshot then.
Yeah, it focuses on a pretty specific period from 1961 to 1965.
Okay, so we're talking about Dylan's early years, his rise in Greenwich Village, the performance at the Washington Mall,
Oh, and of course, we can't forget about the whole Newport Folk Festival thing in 65.
the infamous going electric moment. Didn't that inspire a whole book?
Yeah, Dylan Goes Electric, Newport, Seeger, Dylan, and the night that split the 60s. And Keane definitely points out that the film is packed with all these figures from Dylan's world. Like, you've got Albert Grossman, Bob Newirth, Joan Baez, even Johnny Cash pops up.
Wow, that's a lot of characters to keep track of.
I know, right? Keane even mentions that for people who aren't hardcore Dylan fans, it might feel like, who are all these people?
Hmm.
Although he did specifically praise Monica Barbaro's portrayal of Joan Baez, he thought her performance and singing were especially strong.
Interesting. So we've got the setting, the key players, and these big events. What about the accuracy of it all? Did Keane point out any creative liberties the filmmakers took?
Oh, yeah. He definitely pointed out a few moments where the film kind of strays from what actually happened.
You mean like those little details that would make a Dylan historian cringe?
Exactly. For instance, the whole Judas shout didn't actually happen at Newport in 65. That was a year later in England.
Ah, so they played around with the timeline a bit.
And another thing, Johnny Cash wasn't actually at the 65 Newport Festival, even though the film shows him there. Plus, there are some scenes with Woody Guthrie that are completely made up.
So it's not a straight-up documentary, that's for sure. More of a artistic interpretation, maybe.
Yeah, and that seems to be where Keane is a bit conflicted. On the one hand, he's pointing out these historical inaccuracies, but on the other, it's like he gets that the film is trying to capture a certain, feeling and essence of Dylan's journey. And it's not just about Dylan himself. One figure who really emerges as important is Pete Seeger. He's played by Edward Norton.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and Keane was really impressed with Norton's performance. Apparently, he even learned to play the banjo for the role.
Wow, that's commitment. So is the film just about the performances, or does Keane talk about anything else that stood out to him?
Yeah, he also had some really interesting things to say about the film's visuals. He specifically mentioned the wide shots and how they're used to convey meaning.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, there's this one scene where Susa Rotolo, who was Dylan's girlfriend at the time, is watching Baez and Dylan perform together. And the way it's filmed with that wide shot, it just says so much about the dynamics between those three people, those unspoken tensions and complexities.
Wow. It sounds like there's a lot more going on in this film than meets the eye.
It's not just a surface level biopic. It feels like there are these layers to unpack.
So what do you think? What's the overall impact of these visual choices? Do they add to the story or distract from it?
That's a good question. It seems like Keane is suggesting that.
Well, it's like this. This movie, much like Dylan himself, leaves you with more questions than answers. There's this sense of mystery that it intentionally maintains, Almost like it's designed to make you think, who is this guy?
Yeah, it's like trying to put together a puzzle, but you're missing some pieces. And I think that's what makes Dylan such a fascinating figure.
Yeah.
He never fit neatly into any box. It's like that saying, the more you learn, the less you know. And the film doesn't even try to give you all the answers. It just focuses on this one period in his life, right? A time of huge change and growth, culminating in him going electric, and then that motorcycle accident a year later.
The accident that basically made him retreat from public life.
Exactly. It's like the film is tracing this arc, almost like a shooting star. It burns bright for a while and then vanishes, and you're left wondering where it came from and where it went.
Great analogy.
And what's interesting is that Keane isn't just reviewing the film on a technical level. He's actually using it to explore bigger questions about art and fame and our fascination with the unknown.
It's almost like he's using the film as a jumping off point to grapple with the whole enigma of Bob Dylan, and he's inviting us to do the same, right? He's not giving us all the answers, but laying out the pieces and letting us connect the dots.
So thinking about our listeners then, why should they care about this? What's the relevance of a movie review, a biopic about a musician who's been a cultural icon for decades?
I think it's about something we can all relate to. We all love stories, right? We're all drawn to mysteries. We want to understand the world around us and the people in it. And sometimes the people we find most interesting are the ones who we can't easily define.
The ones who keep us guessing.
Exactly. And maybe that's why Bob Dylan still has this hold on us even after all these years. He's a constant reminder that there's always more to learn, even about people we think we know really well.
So are you saying everyone should go see this film, even if they aren't big Dylan fans?
I think it's worth considering, even if you don't know much about his music. The film asks some pretty interesting questions about being an artist, about the price of fame, about the balance between revealing yourself and keeping some things hidden.
It almost sounds like it's less of a typical music biopic and more of like a meditation on creativity and identity.
Exactly. And who knows? It might even make you want to check out Dylan's music for the first time. Or, if you're already a fan, it might give you a new perspective on his work.
This whole conversation has definitely made me want to put on some Dylan. So to keep exploring, where do we go from here? What's the next step?
I think it's worth thinking about what Keane doesn't say in the review. He spends a lot of time on the film's portrayal of Dylan himself, but what about the other figures? What do Joan Baez or Pete Seeger or even Suze Rodolo add to our understanding of Dylan?
Oh, that's a good point. We've been so focused on Dylan that we haven't really considered those around him.
And sometimes the people closest to a person can offer the most insightful perspectives, right?
So maybe this deep dive isn't just about Bob Dylan. Maybe it's about the network of relationships and events that shaped him.
The things that influenced his life and his music.
And how he influenced them, too.
This web of interconnectedness, right? Each thread pulling on the others.
So where does that leave us? What's the main takeaway from this deep dive?
I think it comes back to that idea of the unknown. Whether it's Bob Dylan or any other artist, there's always a part of them that remains a mystery.
A part we may never fully understand.
And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's what keeps us engaged.
The more you know, the less you know.
Exactly. And that might be the best part of it all. The journey of discovery never really ends.
I love that. Well, I think it might be time to start wrapping up this deep dive into A Complete Unknown, which we learned about from James T. Keene's review in America Magazine.
Before we do, I'd like to leave our listeners with one last thought to ponder.
So we've been talking about Dylan as this, unknowable figure, this complete unknown, just like the film title says. But does the movie actually do a good job of capturing that? Does it make you wrestle with the man in the myth? Or does it kind of flatten him out?
No, that's the real question, isn't it? It's like, is the movie just presenting an image, or is it really inviting us to think critically about who Dylan is?
And that's what I find so interesting about this deep dive. It's not just about taking in information. It's about actively engaging with it, pushing back, questioning things, and coming to our own conclusions.
And we really want to hear what you think. What are your thoughts on A Complete Unknown? Did it shed light on the enigma of Bob Dylan, or did it make him even more mysterious?
Yeah, let us know. And remember, we've been exploring all of this based on James T. Keene's review, which you can find in America Magazine.
Until next time, keep on diving deep.